Every room he went into was illuminated by his presence. That wild grin, that boundless energy, the jokes that had everyone in stitches. When he walked the red carpet, Jim Carrey seemed like the luckiest guy alive. Beauties, fortune, and adoring female companions. A beautiful and bright woman was his wife. Plus, it seemed like everything was okay from the outside. Still, they slipped away one by one. Minimal conflict. There were no controversies, only quiet exits that left supporters confused. What the hey? Why was it that Jim Carrey's love life was cut short? Everything has changed now that we know the truth, which was hidden for years. Jim Carrey did not come from a privileged or famous family. He went from struggling teen to comic superstar. He came from a big family and had 3 elder siblings while growing up in Newmarket, Ontario, Canada. Kathleen stayed at home to raise their son, while Percy worked as an accountant and musician. Jim Carrey was brought up in a Catholic household by his Irish, Scottish, and French-Canadian grandparents. At a young age, Jim had a gift for humor. At 8 in the morning, he would make expressions in front of the mirror. By 10 in the morning, he would have written that he was an impressionist extraordinaire and that the Carol Burnett Show should employ him. Even though it was a generic form letter, he was surprised to get a response. Having said that, domestic matters did not always have humor. The Carriers' financial situation was dire. While Jim was younger, he and his brother even slept in a tent beside Lake Ontario, while the entire family lived out of a Volkswagen van. His father's steady employment at a tire plant eventually helped things improve. Jim and his brother, who were both teenagers at the time, worked as janitors and security guards in exchange for housing nearby. While Jim was enrolled in school and started to fantasize about a career in comedy. At the age of 16, Jim ditched high school and started doing stand-up comedy in Toronto. His debut performance at Yuck Yuck's Comedy Club was a disaster. His mom picked out the suit for him because she felt it was nice, and he blew it. However, he continued anyhow. Jim returned 2 years later, bolstered by his experience and the support of his family, with an even better performance. Had paid bookings start rolling in. His first $20 was for a 20-minute performance in 1979. Everything took off from that point on. Even if several of his programs bombed, he still managed to become a household name in Canada. A rock concert goer booed him off stage one night. Everything changed, though, once a gushing review appeared in the Toronto Star. Jim started making TV appearances, as well as the attention of legendary comedian Rodney Dangerfield, who invited him on a tour. Jim moved to Hollywood in the early 1980s in the hopes of becoming a famous American television actor. He made an appearance on Johnny Carson's The Tonight Show and had a short-lived sitcom called The Duck Factory. Even though he didn't get the invitation to appear on the couch, a huge deal back then, it greatly influenced his career. In the 1980s, Carrey kept trying out for SNL and landed modest roles in films. I think I said it 3 times. But time and again, he was turned down. However, he remained unfazed. Despite his struggles with melancholy, Jim Carrey finally broke through in the 1990s with the sketch show In Living Color, which spawned genre-defining hits like Ace Ventura, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber. Regarding his lengthy battle with melancholy, Jim Carrey has been exceedingly forthright. He admitted in a legendary 2004 60 Minutes interview that he used Prozac for a long time, but that it never helped him feel better. In his life, he referred to it as a low level of despair. You could be able to carry on with your day and perhaps crack a smile while you're at work. Nonetheless, an underlying unease would persist. Although Prozac got me out of a problem temporarily, it didn't work well over the long run, as Carrey explained. Instead, it dampened his emotional ups and downs without allowing him to face his real problems. After some time, Jim decided to stop taking his prescription. He completely detoxed himself from all substances, even coffee, and chose to live a life without alcohol and excess. Additionally, he devoted himself entirely to creative pursuits, philosophical contemplation, and spiritual practices like transcendental meditation. His point was that we shouldn't wallow in misery because life is too wonderful. In subsequent interviews, Carrey discussed how, even after discontinuing medication, he still experiences occasional sadness, especially on rainy days. However, those spells are short-lived. Views these emotions as temporary and natural rather than a catastrophe that needs constant attention. It pours down when it arrives, but it quickly evaporates. No longer can it envelop and submerge me in its embrace. Carrey has portrayed depression in conversations with Larry King and others as a symptom rather than a chronic illness. Medications like Prozac, he said in an interview, level the playing field so that you can't get to the root of the problem. In addition, he experiments with natural mood enhancers like tyrosine and 5-HTP. Ego and identity are central to Carrey's philosophical understanding of depression. He says his mood drops every time he tries to live a character, like Jim Carrey, again. Depression, he explains, is the body's way of demanding a break from projecting an artificial persona. Deep rest is what he calls it. It stresses the importance of releasing fictional personas in order to heal. Meditation, simplicity, and deep self-understanding were hallmarks of Jim Carrey's journey away from psychiatric drug dependence and towards spiritual and artistic pursuits. Many individuals who struggle with mental illness can find inspiration and understanding in his own transformation. That despite how stifling despair feels, it can actually be a doorway to profound personal growth. In the 90s, Jim Carrey burst onto the scene in a very distinctive style. Continual energy, frantic body activity, and rubber-jawed grimaces. His meteoric rise to fame in the comedy world began with his breakthrough films Ace Ventura, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber. The critics, however, were divided. His shows, according to many, crossed the line between entertaining and tiring. In 1994, Ace Ventura appeared in Pet Detective. Roger Ebert compared Carrey's Ace to a person who is being compensated according to the calories they burn. He remarked that the performance felt monotonous and exhausting. One of the most erratic performances ever brought to film, according to New York Times critic Stephen Holden. The rapid pace of the music making it suitable exclusively for children's ears. While many of The Mask's reviewers praised Carrey for his physical comedy skills, others felt the show leaned too far toward gimmick overload. Leonard Claudy of Variety said the film was exciting, visually stunning, and full of life, while others said the focus on spectacle obscured the character's growth. Outlook. The assessment from later in the year in India said that Carrey would squat down on stage to grab your attention and likened his need for praise to an obsession with fame. His detractors said he cared more about his popularity than about delivering nuanced, really amusing performances. Academic reviews panned Carrey's performance, calling it in-your-face bodily humor, featuring exaggerated movements, spasms, and vocal spasms that devolved into caricature rather than character. Although the style may impress at first, critics have noted that it quickly becomes stale or uninteresting. Similar gripes were voiced by a large number of Reddit commenters. At his most ridiculous, he overacts, makes strange noises, and is downright annoying when he's attempting to be humorous, according to one critic. One more person said that Carrey was great in tragic roles, but that her comedic timing was too much to bear. Some viewers even detected glimmers of Carrey's earlier vivaciousness in her 1998 portrayal of The Truman Show, which was more muted and serious. According to one Reddit user, his overly energetic performance detracted from the film's tone and cut them out of key emotional moments. However, he gained praise for deftly channeling that energy in his darker roles in 1990's IXS The Cable Guy. Yet both reviewers and viewers voiced their disapproval at the time. Instead of the cartoonish fun they were hoping for, they got something strange and unsettling. A cult following developed for the picture after its initial reception criticized it for being tone-deaf to context and misinterpreting Carrey's characteristic energy. Jim Carrey may be best known for his comedic timing, but his views on immunizations in 2009 produced quite a stir. Concerned about children's vaccine safety practices, he wrote an article for the Huffington Post. Actress and TV anchor Jenny McCarthy, with whom he was in a relationship, had been quite outspoken about her views on vaccinations. A massive demonstration in Washington, D.C. was planned by them jointly. Save the environment with vaccines. Their goal wasn't to do away with vaccines altogether, but to draw attention to the substances they believed were harmful and the idea that children were getting too many immunizations too quickly. Although they pushed for what they called safer options, Carrey and McCarthy insisted they were in favor of immunizations. It was misunderstood by many specialists. Scientists and doctors panned the march, saying it propagated false information and instilled fear. Regardless of the tactics used to promote it, cancer surgeon and blogger David Gorski of Science-Based Medicine deemed the rally anti-vaccine. They were deemed irresponsible by WebMD's Stephen Parker. It is worth mentioning that this could discourage parents from vaccinating their children, which is beneficial for both the children and the community as a whole. The debate heated up again in 2015 when the state of California passed a vaccination mandate for students, doing away with exemptions based on religion or personal belief. A measles outbreak raised worries about the lack of vaccinations, which led to the passage of the law. The silence was broken by Carrey. He accused former California Governor Jerry Brown of putting children in danger by endorsing the new law in a scathing Twitter criticism. More criticism followed that outburst. Arthur Kaplan, a prominent bioethicist from New York University, blasted Carrey for lacking knowledge and called his comments insensitive. Jeffrey Kluger, a senior writer for Time magazine, was even more scathing. His assessment of Carrey's anti-vaccine views was that they were irrational, hostile, and rooted in her ignorance of public health and science. Despite Carrey's repeated claims that children's welfare was his first priority, some in the medical field believe his remarks were harmful rather than helpful. When it comes to parents, the topic of vaccines is complex and emotionally charged. However, public confusion and mistrust could result from celebrity opinions, especially when those opinions go against the grain of medical consensus. Carrey considers his involvement in the vaccine dispute to be a highly controversial event in his public life. His ideologies, both political and spiritual. Jim Carrey's talents extend beyond comedy. A passionate artist, he also seeks meaning in life and engages in deep contemplation. Carrey was already using the law of attraction before she became famous. In an interview he gave to Oprah Winfrey in 1997, he discussed how, while he was a struggling actor, he would fantasize of being famous. He entertained the idea of putting $10 million in his own pocket as payment for his acting skills. And then, after 7 years, receiving the identical sum for much dumber. Additionally, he finds that transcendental meditation helps him relax and get creative. Carrey was spotted at a 2009 public event with Eckhart Tolle, a spiritual guru. Reading about Tolle's teachings, he said, gave him a sudden insight. At that point, I had stopped being a cosmic particle. I was everything. He showed respect and the ability to lighten spiritual conversations with humor by publicly imitating Tolle. From a political standpoint, has been vocal in his support of socialism and has urged the Democratic Party to fully embrace it. We must say yes to socialism, he proclaimed at one point. Apologies are something we must cease. An actor from Hollywood takes a statement that could lead to controversy, but he never backs down. In August of 2017, Carrey also began expressing his creative side through political cartooning. His drawings were more satirical than humorous, and they focused on political figures such as Sarah Huckabee Sanders and Donald Trump. In March 2019, he and his long-standing collaborator Clara Petacci produced one of his most controversial pictures, which satirically recreated Benito Mussolini's demise. The people reacted strongly to that article. His granddaughter slammed Mussolini's art and referred to him as a bastard. With the opening of Indignation in October 2018 at Los Angeles' Macaroni Gallery, the majority of these cartoons were gathered together for an exhibition. The 108 drawings showcased here were done with pen and ink, and many of them had previously been tweeted between 2016 and 2018. However, Carrey announced his resignation from political cartooning in February 2021, effectively ending that chapter of his creative life. Carrey has stated that, on a spiritual level, he welcomes all faiths. He described himself as a Christian, a Muslim, and a Buddhist in a 2004 interview with 60 Minutes. What he sees as the shared spiritual essence throughout the world's faiths is something he tries to pin down. I feel this room is filled with God, and that you are heroes to me. He addressed to individuals getting by in a 2017 speech to a Homeboy Industries gala, showcasing his artwork and NFTs. Jim Carrey has also been diligently pursuing his artistic passions for quite some time. In 2017, Carrey mentioned in an interview that he had been painting for 6 years prior. Thus, it was around 2011, and he did not conceal it for long. Nothing to see here. His debut solo exhibition took place in 2011 at Palm Springs' Heather James Fine Art Gallery. For most people, that was their first look at a side of him they had never seen before. In 2017, Carrey released a short documentary called I Needed Color, which allowed viewers a glimpse inside his creative process. His 6-minute video shows him immersed in his art studio as he splatters paint, blends colors, and loses himself in the process. Art has become an integral part of his life. It is a form of self-expression, a therapy, and a deeply personal experience. Carrey jumped into the realm of digital art in April of 2022, marking her entry into the modern art world. He debuted Sunshower, his first non-fungible token, on Super Rare. In addition to being a digital reproduction of the artwork, the NFT features a vocal narration by Carrey himself. This work was more than just a beautiful painting because of the personal touch. His creative vision and modern technologies came together in this. Jim Carrey has shown a different side of his inventiveness through his painting career, which has been featured on digital tokens and gallery walls. Just painting for the sake of painting, disregarded by the media. His current sources of inspiration are vibrancy, reflection, and color. Any medium can convey the same meaning, be it a digital token or an old-fashioned canvas. Originality is eternal. It merely assumes a different form. Even before Jim Carrey became a household name around the world as a comedian, rumors circulated about his rocky love life. His relationship with legendary singer Linda Ronstadt began in 1983. For almost 8 months, it was a passionate love affair. At the time, Carrey was only beginning to gain notoriety, and his association with Ronstadt catapulted him into the spotlight. Despite the brief duration of their romance, it undoubtedly added intrigue to his early years in Hollywood. Melissa Walmer was an ex-actress and waitress at the Comedy Store, a club near to Carrey's stand-up comedy origins. Jim fell in love with her again a few years later. Something even more miraculous happened to them after their March 28, 1987, wedding. Jane Erin Carrey, their daughter, was born on September 6. Over time, Jane would go on to create solo vocal albums. Somehow managed to get an audition for 2012's American Idol. Everything appeared to be running smoothly for the young family for a while. However, she may have succumbed to the pressures of fame, working continuously, and Jim's rising prominence. Jim and Melissa's 1995 divorce came 8 years after they tied the knot. At the time, the split didn't make headlines, but it eventually fell into place. While setting the stage for what was to come in Carrey's life, the ebb and flow of love, with little explanation from on high. Jim, though, remained very close to his daughter even after they broke up. The story that shaped him included Melissa, who had witnessed his meteoric rise from stand-up stardom to Hollywood superstardom. The years to come would be much more fruitful for you as a performer and a person. Other romantic partners, and further conjecture over the reality of the situation behind the scenes. Lauren Holly, Jim Carrey's Dumb and Dumber co-star, was married to Carrey in September 1996, shocking most fans. The marriage didn't last long. The modest, paparazzi-free wedding took place on a hillside overlooking the Pacific on September 23, 1996. Yet the paparazzi did succeed in locating them to a certain extent. Before working together on 1994's Dumb and Dumber, Jim and Lauren met during Ace Ventura auditions. They started dating seriously in the middle of 1994 and were married in 1996 after being together for over 2 years. It was right around this time when Carrey's fame skyrocketed. As Holly's star continued to rise thanks to her work in film and television, their relationship looked good at first. Lauren gushed about how much fun they had on set and called him the sweetest person in town, describing him as completely infatuated. In an effort to keep things under wraps, they had a small, low-key wedding with few guests. The marriage, however, ended rather quickly. After being married for 9 months, Lawrence filed for a divorce on July 29, 1997, citing irreconcilable differences as the reason. Records indicate that they officially separated on or around June 25, 1997. The breakup was brief, but it certainly provided enough material for rumors. There was unfounded speculation about infidelity, media intrusions, or the pressures of celebrity among some of the gossips. In a following interview from 2013, Lauren reflected on how difficult it was to cope with the separation. She recalled being branded a gold digger in coffee places and expressed her frustration when people misunderstood her intentions. She came clean and said that everyone was wrong about the tale. But she kept insisting that she and Jim were always friendly and talked about the excellent times they had. Despite their emotional separation, neither of them belittled the other. Even after all this time had passed, Lauren and Jim never stopped being complimentary of his abilities, their shared experiences, and themselves. They each went on with their own lives and occupations. She remarried Canadian banker Francis Greco in due course, and Carrey explored more dramatic parts in films and relationships during this time. As Jim Carrey's acting career has been full of highs and lows, joys and sorrows, his romantic life has been just as eventful and dramatic. It all started in 1999, when Carrey began dating Renee Zellweger, who co-starred with him in Me, Myself, and Irene. They became one of Hollywood's most talked-about couples after their on-screen connection carried over into real life. Word on the street was that they were engaged. He once expressed his admiration for her by calling her a gem of a human being, a term that Carrey used. In the end, though, Zellweger said that the engagement talk was a bit dramatic. It happened after they had just dated for a short while. It seemed like they cared for each other, though. Sadly, the affair came to an end in the latter part of the year 2000. It was said that their breakup was caused in part by the pressures of fame and their individual aspirations. January Jones, star of Mad Men, was briefly his girlfriend in 2002. It was a short-lived romance that didn't garner much attention. At the time, tabloids speculated about possible overlapping relationship timelines, but neither party ever confirmed the rumors. There was no great climax, and it seemed to fade away eventually. Jenny McCarthy, a famous model and actress, was Carrey's next significant other. In 2005, they started dating. They made their relationship public knowledge in June 2006. They were a highly visible and esteemed pair in Hollywood for nearly 5 years. Due to McCarthy's son's 2005 autism diagnosis, the two shared an interest in activism, namely in raising awareness of the disorder. She had Carrey's unwavering backing and was frequently seen at her events. Nevertheless, they split up in April 2010 despite how close they had become. McCarthy continued by saying they were still good friends, and Carey replied the same, adding that he was grateful for the time they had together. Carey began dating Irish makeup artist Catriona White in 2012. When White passed away in September 2015 from an overdose of prescription drugs, it was a tragedy for the family. It was concluded that the deceased committed suicide. It crushed Carey's heart. He went to Ireland to carry a pall at the memorial service held at Kappa Heights, her hometown. He clearly still feels the effects of the split, which was a terribly painful time in his life. Along with his kidding co-star Ginger Gonzaga, Carey attended the 2019 Golden Globe celebration. Although they dated for just a short while, they made their red carpet debut together, and everyone was relieved to see him smiling again. Exactly 1 year and 10 days. Since then, Carey has kept his romantic life under wraps, devoting more time and energy to his music, his faith, and his career. Jim Carrey's tragic and deeply felt on-again, off-again romance with Catriona White is known as the Catriona White tragedy. Since 2012, Irish cosmetics artist Catriona has an erratic relationship with Carey. However, the truth was far more nuanced than the average person ever imagined. Catriona wed Mark Burton in Las Vegas in 2013, but she and Carey continued to be romantically together even afterward. In 2015, Carey's death from a heroin overdose sent shockwaves across her life and the media. Mark Burton, Catriona's husband, sued Jim Carrey for wrongful death in September 2016, nearly 1 year after his wife's death. According to the lawsuit, Carey utilized his fame and fortune to illegally obtain and supply Catriona with prescription medications, which played a role in her death. The complaint painted Carey in a negative light, accusing him of enabling her harmful behavior. However, Carey chose not to remain silent. The next day, he expressed his deep sorrow over the events in a public statement. Claiming it was an evil plot to take advantage of him and the lady he loved, he attacked the case. Even before they met, Carey said that Catriona had been struggling for a long time, and that no one could have stopped the tragedy that was her death. He made it clear that he would not back down just to protect his reputation. It would be easier for me to collude with the man's attorney to have this dismissed, but sometimes you just have to stand up for what you believe in and defend your honor. I will not tolerate this. Only a few months after Burton's suit, Catriona's mother, Bridget Sweetman, also brought a wrongful death suit of her own. She blamed Carey for deceiving the world and the courts, denouncing him as a dishonest Hollywood star who thought he could get away with everything because of his celebrity status. Her language was tough and unvarnished, obviously a reflection of intense anguish and sorrow. The suits added intense media scrutiny and additional emotional stress to an already disastrous situation. But after a year or more of court maneuvering, the two lawsuits were formally dismissed on January 25, 2018. Counsel for both sides stipulated that no further litigation would ensue. Even though the lawsuits were over, the psychological effect of Catriona's death lingered on Carey. It was one of the bleakest moments in his life, one that saw love, loss, and public scrutiny intertwine in the worst possible manner. Jim Carrey's love life has often been as dramatic and layered as the roles he's played on screen while his career soared. His romantic relationships often unfolded under public scrutiny and with emotional complexity. He is never married again after his short-lived marriage to Melissa Wammer in the 1990s, but his heart has been tied to several high-profile women, including actress Renee Zellweger and model Jenny McCarthy. Some relationships were playful and public. Others were intensely private and, at times, heartbreakingly tragic. Through it all, Carey has openly spoken about the vulnerability and emotional toll that love and loss have had on him. He once described himself as a romantic at heart, someone who dives in deeply even if it means getting hurt. Perhaps that's why his portrayals of love on screen feel so authentic, because behind the humor, there's a man who has truly known both the joy and sorrow of loving. If you enjoyed exploring the raw and remarkable journey of Jim Carrey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. More untold stories, emotional moments, and behind-the-scenes truths are on the way.